Hello.
Hello.
So this talk is about self-care, and it's about creating your own self-care toolkit, if you like. So self-care is such a huge topic. If you put it into Google to try and find out where to start, it's going to throw up like a billion results. And if you're in need of self-care and you don't know where to start, that's going to be a little bit overwhelming. So what I'm hoping to do here is to just open the topic up and give you a few little starting points. So who am I to be doing this talk? Well, I am a trained counsellor, but that actually has nothing to do with why I'm doing the talk. It's just that I studied for years and it cost me loads of money. So if I can possibly boast about it, then I'm going to. The real reason I'm doing this talk is hello. Now you can see my face. The real reason I'm doing this talk is 2016 and 2017 were pretty tough, quite rubbish in parts. And I needed a way of coping. I needed a new way of coping. Those years pretty much took everything I have. Then they came back and asked for a little bit more. Now, I didn't have the time or the energy or the mental capacity to have some kind of amazing exercise habit or cook organic meals from scratch, fill my home with scented candles, meditate for hours, or any of these other good feel-good things that will do you good, but frankly take far too much time and energy to think about. But I needed self-care. I needed to look after myself. I needed a new toolkit because the one that I had been using just wasn't working anymore. So this talk is self-care for those of us who aren't sure that we've got the time or the energy for it, or are sure that we don't. I'm also doing this talk because we're in this for the long haul. And there's a lot to do in this life and there's never enough time for it. Not everything is your job. It just feels like it sometimes. And self-compassion is not the same as self-indulgence. So, what is self-care? What does it mean? Well, I asked some of my friends to help me out with that one. And the answers seem to fall into a few main categories. One was taking time for ourselves, an amount of time with us and our well-being as the priority. Now, how much time, that is going to depend on you and what your life allows you, and also how comfortable you are. It's no point taking hours and hours if you're going to be sat there bored, stiff, or frustrated, or really uncomfortable. That's not self-care. Another thing was slowing down. So slowing down in order to think and reassess, to be mindful of your life and your place in it. Now that is not the same as taking time for you, because that's a bit about stepping out of your life and taking time out. This is about slowing down while still getting on with the stuff that needs to be got on with. And quite importantly, checking in with ourselves about what we need. Then, if possible, supplying it. We need to ask ourselves, what do I need? We also need to be honest and realistic with our answers, because demanding things we can't have is not self-care, it's just frustrating. Now, for many parents, many carers in particular, these things can be really difficult. They take a lot of time, effort and planning, and so they weren't something that people felt that they could do often, regularly, or sometimes even at all. A lot of people felt immense guilt about not putting themselves last, let alone first. They acknowledged that self-care was vital. They just couldn't see a way of doing it and fitting it in. And sometimes being given permission to take care of yourself is needed when your life is focused on taking care of other people. So self-care is often focused on the very foundations of well-being. Things such as washing, dressing, taking your medications or your vitamins, eating nutritiously if possible, sometimes just at all, drinking water, and and also drinking, in my case, coffee in the morning so that I don't kill everyone on my morning bus commute to work. And exercise, moving, fresh air, or dancing. Very simple, basic things. At least that's what I hope they sound like, because if they do, that means we're already doing really well. For too many people, me at times, possibly you, certainly people you know, some or all of these things have been overwhelming and difficult to achieve at times. More than these things, and we start drifting into the realms of nurture, which is also very important, self-care. But when we're struggling, it's quite important to recognise the difference between self-care and nurture. And it's important not to confuse them. Self-care is also something that is fluid and changing. So sometimes it's giving yourself the break that you need from things, and sometimes it is kicking yourself up the backside to finish something. Sometimes it's managing these points, and sometimes it is dipping into nurture to nurture yourself and do much more. A friend of mine, Kate, said, "It isn't being nice to yourself, it's being kind. And in some cases, that means practicing self-discipline, and it's also different for each person." So, self-care, different things for different people, and also different things for the same person at different times. So this is where checking in with yourself becomes really important. What used to work may not work in the future. What you need today isn't going to be what you need tomorrow. So self-care is thinking about what you need. Self-care is thinking about what's possible, because life is not fair at times. No comparing your toolkit to anyone else's. Take that how you will. So what gets in the way? Well, life. Everything that we need to do. Juggling all of this stuff gets us stressed. And given all these calls on our time and attention, the people that I asked let me know that self-care can be seen as something that feels mildly indulgent rather than essential, and even downright selfish at times. And I have to say that makes me really sad. Self-care is essential and necessary, like breathing, water, food. Taking care of ourselves is part of that package. So what stops us practicing self-care when we don't? And my lovely friends helped me answer that too. So while we can understand what self-care is and why it's important, we struggle to fit it in our lives at the time. We all harbour doubts over how much we sleep, what we eat, how active we are, how much we support the important people in our lives. We all struggle to do the things we know will ultimately help us feel better and to avoid the things that don't. So why? Well, there are many reasons, and all of them are valid. And this talk isn't about guilt-tripping anyone who finds self-care difficult or impossible, but hoping just to acknowledge that and understand why, and see if we can find any ways of working within the restrictions that our lives give us. So if you find self-care tricky, you're not alone. Many people find that they feel guilty or selfish if they take time out for themselves. There's always that big pile of stuff that needs doing. That task list doesn't get smaller by itself. There are friends and family, younger or older people who rely on you, and some of them just can't do without you being there for them. Sometimes we're just too busy. There's just too much to do, and it's real and it's pressured and important, and we're not able to stop. Life is often relentless. We get exhausted and ill, both physically and mentally. Self-care takes time and energy and effort, which we just don't have at times. Sometimes we have low moods or mania, anxiety or full-on depression, which can convince us that we're simply not worthy of self-care, or we don't need it. And that insidious voice is so loud and persuasive that we just can't argue against it, let alone take the extra step of looking after ourselves. Sometimes we actually don't know what self-care is anymore. As I said earlier, there's a lot of information out there, and we can get lost looking at it, not knowing what direction to take. Or sometimes we expect too much of ourselves and we get overwhelmed. We set up this massive regime and we burn ourselves out, and we think anything less than that, well, it's just not worth it, is it? We get lost looking at indulgence and self-care. So should I go out for a long walk in the fresh air, or should I give myself a duvet day? Should I have a really nice indulgent chocolate treat, or should I eat really healthily and organically? And we vacillate between the two, and we just can't make up our minds, and we get stuck. There are so many reasons why self-care is difficult or even impossible, and that is okay. Life is full and busy and chaotic, and it just doesn't stop. So what stops us practicing self-care? Everything. So I want you to know just one thing. Your reasons are valid. They don't make us bad people. No one else can tell you how, when, or if to practice self-care, and no one else lives your life or has your priorities. Only you can know what works for you, what time and energy you have, if any, and what you want to do with it. Allowing yourself to have the intention of self-care may allow these little spaces in your brain where it can creep in. A positive thought here and a deep breath there. It doesn't sound like much, I know. But every task, big and small, starts with the intention to start it. Allow yourself to start wondering what might make some positive difference to you. And maybe the first step is to accept just how tricky it is and to let that be okay. Recognising what stops you practicing self-care is important. You, your life, and everything in it is important. So, where to start? Think about those 3 areas that self-care tasks fall into more often than not. Taking time out, slowing down, and checking in. And find a place or 2 in the day, maybe something you do every or most days. Most of us have some kind of morning routine. And consider maybe taking an extra minute in the shower, slowing down one area of brushing your teeth while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. And maybe use that time to take a deep breath, stretch out your sides a bit, or check in and ask yourself, how can I best take care of myself today? What do I need? What's possible? I also want to challenge something tonight. Self-care has become a bit of a marketing bandwagon. A lot of businesses have jumped on this to sell things, and it can be easy to feel that if you don't have the time or money for whatever they're selling, then it's just not worth bothering. It's now a marketing tool, and it's important not to get sucked into thinking that you have to buy all these things in order to be looking after yourself. And a lot of these things are targeted at women in particular, I've discovered. So this isn't about expensive bubble baths, retail therapy, holidays in the sun, long walks somewhere green, because these things aren't possible for some of us, and they're not sustainable every day for most. If they are sustainable for you every day and you're single, then let's talk later. There are also some very smug, self-righteous people on the internet, hopefully not here tonight, who will talk blithely about their 6 hours of yoga as the sun comes up, and then drinking an organic green smoothie that cures overdrafts and manifests things in the living room. So this can sometimes just make us think that, well, if we can't do that, what's the point? And that's what I'm looking to challenge. Self-care isn't, or shouldn't have to be, complicated, time-consuming, or expensive. There is a lot of useful stuff out there on the internet as well, if you do have time to investigate. There are good articles, there are good ideas, there are good plans, there are good checklists. But again, if you can't meet the criteria on the various self-care checklists that are out there, if you don't have 8 hours a night to sleep, or time to go exercising, if you struggle to speak your mind in groups of people, things like that, then you can look at this list and think, oh, well, I can't do that, so I'll stop. What's the point? So, again, I want to give you permission to ignore these or ignore parts of them, because, as Barbosa says, they're more guidelines than actual rules. So getting back to our toolkits, intention will give us the kit to put our tools in. What tools you put in there are yours to decide. The first tools can be as simple as you like and used as often as life and memory allows. And no one else has to know. This is a very personal thing. You don't have to tell other people what you're doing because it can be easy to feel that other people are judging you for what you're doing and not doing. Your toolkit's private. Keep it to yourself. So think about that single deep breath when you remember to. Maybe stretching a little bit as you're waiting for the kettle to boil. Or asking yourself at some point in the day about how you can care for yourself that day. What do you need? And remember to take into account what's possible. Or try just saying no to those horrible thoughts that can creep into our heads and tell us nasty things about ourselves. Ably demonstrated here by another of my friends. As I wandered up to bed, a bad thought crawled inside my head. You've done nothing today, by God, you waste of space, you useless sod. Before I let this make me blue, I countered with a loud, fuck you. I've been as productive as can be. I made myself that cup of tea. In fact, today I did much more. I ate a biscuit, maybe 4. Knowing I went that extra mile sent me to bed with a smile. Written by my friend Nikki Lawrence in response to a Facebook post by Bricky, who had a bad thought and told it where to go. Make up your own pyramid. Put whatever you want on there. Not going to judge it. If you use Twitter, Everyday Carebot has a lot of good, simple, everyday things on there. It's nothing to do with me. I have nothing to do with it. I just came across it and I liked it. If you use Facebook, Sweatpants and Coffee has a lot of good self-care things on there. You don't have to like coffee to like it, but it kind of helps, and I like coffee. So think about self-care and what to put in your toolkit, perhaps when you don't need it, so that it's there, ready for you when you do. And as my t-shirt says, and I'm going to paraphrase my t-shirt slightly, if in this world you could be anything, be kind, and be kind to yourself. And if all else fails,
indeed, that is a unicorn. In fact, that's an award, but that I'm going to give out later. I need to come to that. But thank you very much, Tania, for a wonderful, wonderful talk. Does anybody have any questions for Tania? And anything unicorn-y-ness or toolkit-ness, which I'll skip over the toolkit, but it will make me trouble. But yes, any questions for Tania and your journey that you referenced, Tania, that got you interested in that? That was in 16 and 17?
16 and 17 were horrid years, yeah. So that's kind of how I've ended up here.
What's your favourite?
What's my favourite coffee? One that someone else makes and brings to me in bed. That's my favourite coffee. I don't often get that coffee.
Get flat whites in there.
I don't know. I'm very simple with my coffee taste. Just black coffee. Black coffee will do me.
Someone to bring. I'd like flat white in there.
I don't know. We'll see if we can set this up. Maybe a Facebook page.
Yes, sorry, Fiona. Yeah.
Hi.
That was brilliant.
Thank you.
In your studies and all that you've been doing, have you worked out why we don't automatically do this?
There are as many reasons as there are people. I think sometimes we can get to a point of stress where if we actually start to relax and let go, all this emotion is going to start flooding out, and we either just can't deal with that or we don't have time for that at the moment. Certainly I've had points in my life where I've had to be holding on by my fingertips quite carefully, and I can't relax because I don't have time to deal with all the emotions. I just have to hold on and get through and hope that there's time later. There can be many reasons. Sometimes people were brought up are not in that environment. They're not taught to look after themselves, and if we're not taught it when we're young, it can be difficult to learn when we're older. There's a million reasons.
Yes, here. Sorry.
Yeah, I've just read a book called The Idiot Brain, and it was saying how we are more likely to spend our energy looking after our pets than looking after ourselves.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the reason. It gave a reason why we do this, but I have no idea what it is. So you have to read the book if you want to.
It's very good. There's something called compulsive caring, where we try and look after our own needs by meeting the needs of other people.
Oh, well, there you go. Well done, thanks.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Sorry. And unicorns as well.
And unicorns.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to... Oh, yeah, I'll take one last question and then we'll... Yeah, Jim.
How did you come across the idea of a toolkit?
A toolkit? I don't know, actually. It just popped into my head. It kind of... The idea of a toolkit actually came up when I was developing this talk. Was I was thinking about different ways of self-care, and then just the idea of something to pop them into came up. And I kind of like that idea, just having a container that we sort of mentally put all our little coping techniques into.
You've got to be in Q moment then.
Mine's purple. It's got a unicorn on it, yeah. Probably a panda as well.
Fantastic. Right, in which case I'm going to... thanks for that question, Jim. And can we thank Tania again? For a wonderful talk, and I know Tania is now going to go and enjoy a glass of wine and self-care with alcohol, I think.